All right. Yeah, I'm just going to tell my story. Go ahead. Just kick those off. So our family moved from Pennsylvania to a tiny little town in Minnesota called St. Joseph because my dad got a teaching job in the art department at the College of St. Benedict, which is in this tiny little town. He was a graphic designer, photographer, silkscreen artist. He was all these things, and super into linoleum, which is my medium of choice. He was really very talented. These are some of his posters. I have memories of like washing screens, when I was like a wee little lass. But I was just totally into all things art, like my dad, and like so kind of that was like high school. I was really into that. He taught at St. Ben's for about 8 years. Then he worked at the liturgical press out at St. John's, and then he went to the art department at St. Cloud State, which is where I went to college. There wasn't really much of a letterpress studio at St. Cloud State, but they had all the other stuff, And I was really into printmaking because of my dad, but it was kind of around this time. So, I think I was still in high school, but he was hanging out with all these old school printers that were still letterpress printing for, I don't know what they were printing, but he was really into the machines and all of the like typography and stuff. And, Brad and I were trying to figure out when these transitions really happened, but like as new technology came onto the scene, like there was a point where letterpress was completely obsolete to a lot of these printers. So they were just kind of dumping a lot of their stuff. They were dumping their type, they were pitching their presses because, well, it's done. Offset or whatever was next was coming in and they needed to make room. My dad was hanging out with these guys and he's like, well, I'll take this stuff. And they're like, Bruno, if you can move it, you can have it. So, he built, over the course of his summer, he built on a little studio to the garage of the house I grew up in and just loaded in these presses, a couple of Vandercook cylinder presses and platen presses and just a shitload of type, because he was really into design. So there was just this really cool studio that I got to hang out with him, run presses, carve, do all this stuff, and it was amazing. I think I always sort of thought that art would be, my side hustle, my hobby. So I never really thought about it as a career path, even though I went to St. Cloud State and studied art. In fact, I never really wanted to graduate because I was like, well, why would I want to go out into the real world? Like college rules. But I did finally graduate and I moved away, because I wasn't into the small town stuff. I thought I was a big city kid. So I moved away to Madison, Wisconsin. I worked 100 million different jobs, bartending, and I think I was a cake decorator. And I worked 100 million different jobs, but I sort of felt like, I can always work. I'm a hard worker. Making money isn't a problem, but I wanted to do that so that I could have time to do art. So I went home back to St. Joe, which was like a 5-hour drive often, to print with my dad. So the next big thing that happened in my life was, this was 2003, my dad passed away real suddenly. And so I think that was the first time in my life that I really had a holy shit, what am I gonna do with my life kind of thing. And I had this letterpress print shop back in this little town of St. Joe that I had to figure out what I was gonna do with. So I think I was like, I guess I'm moving back to Minnesota. And at first, I was like, well, I'll just go to Minneapolis, because Minneapolis is a big city and it's cool and whatever. So I did that first, connected with some cool people. I sort of had to find printers like me, and found the Minnesota Center for Book Arts and places like that where I could, I still didn't know what my deal was or how to do anything. So I kind of was all about finding people. I finally went all the way back to St. Joe and was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. And I was like, it was really hard to be in that shop without my dad there. And so what I did was I drug my 15-year-old niece in there with me. And we would just print and drink coffee and, print funny swears on cards because there was no adults around. And that was kind of, I was like, well, if I'm in charge, I'm gonna do some cool shit. So that was kind of where I just started playing and having fun. The first thing I did was designed a logo, and I'm not like a classically trained graphic designer. Like I've learned it over the last 16 years, but I didn't know. But one of the first things I did was so this was my dad's logo. He was a freelance designer and all this cool stuff, and I never really got to ask him what that logo was about. But, I took his rooster and then added me, who's the kid of the rooster, and then came up with this little chick. Sometimes out of context, people are like, what are you, a chicken farmer? And I'm like, no, but this is the story. So that's the logo, and that was cool. And then I still was trying to figure out what my deal was, what kind of printer I was, all these different things. And so one of the things I spent a lot of time doing was taking a ton of classes at this Center for Book Arts, which is like a place where fine printers print, and so I would be there with all these, kind of white glove kind of printers where they were looking through magnifying glasses at their printing, and everything was so perfect. And I'm over here like covered with ink, just like laying down stuff, and it just didn't feel right. So the first time I met Amos Paul Kennedy was at a class. Someone was like, dude, you need to take a class with this guy. Like he's your speed. So him and I hit it off immediately. And one of the things that he sort of like taught me was, dude, you're a printer. Like ditch the word fine. You're just a printer. You're just getting the message in the hands of the people. And that was like huge for me to sort of like release the pressure of thinking that I had to be whatever, something else. So that was like a big deal for me. Then, so it was around that time too that I met Brad Vetter, Go Getter. So I had to go back to school, like a tech school, even though I had gone to college. Like this was right when, computers and art were coming onto the scene, and I was like, computers and art? Well, that's ridiculous. Joke's on me, because obviously that's where everything is. So I had to go back to school. Like I went to a tech school and learned the creative suite stuff, which was huge, but we had to do an internship before, I got my AA or whatever, and I was like, I'm going to Hatch. And this was a little bit before, 2007, that was a long time ago, but all these other students, because I'm this like non-trad going to school, and all these young kids were going to stay local and go to Speedy Print and all these, and I'm like, I'm going to Nashville. And so I did, and it was incredible. And I learned a ton from these guys, including Brad and Jim. And, this was before Hatch was where it is now. It was still dirty, and there was like no computers. Actually, there was a computer with the little green blinky cursor. But we had to like design stuff physically, like move type, roll ink on it and make a proof. And then, there was no computer stuff. So it was right up my alley. And, I kind of gained some confidence with these guys and learned a ton about poster design, and that was really cool. I came back home, and I was starting to make more partnerships in my own community. I was kind of finding my lane, and so I started doing these broadsides with visiting poets that would come to the college, which was huge for me. This is, what's his name? Billy Collins. It was cool because I'd always get to meet them and hang out, whatever. But like a broadside is loosely like text and image, so it could be anything. But it was really fun to be able to get paid, from an institution to do stuff like that. So I think I was starting to, gain some confidence, yada yada. Here's some of my salty cards, and this was cool too because I'm printing swears and dope and all this stuff that I think is funny. And this is OG, people, there wasn't cards like this 15 years ago. So, I do these local little art fairs, and I was really nervous that people were going to, judge me. But even old ladies were just giving me money, and they're like, this is amazing. We love these cards. So the cards were starting to take off, which was huge for me. Then, I think my whole thing I started to learn was that I didn't want to just do one thing. I wanted to be able to do all these things and diversify, because it's hard to put all your eggs in one basket as far as I was concerned. So I started doing this calendar, which I brought a couple, but this was the last year. 10 years I did these, and it was all linoleum blocks. And then my buddy Andy, who was a printer a couple towns away. He would letterpress print the whole thing. Like, it was this 9-month project, and it was amazing, and people loved them and collected them, and it was cool, but then it was time to retire. And during all this time, I had tons of like interns. So I was in this small college town, and I'd have all these young people, because the faculty would bring their classes to my shop and see all this stuff I was doing, and so I always had interns, which is huge for me because I was in no position to be paying anybody yet. But I had all these interns, and so I was like, I want to try to do a broadside exchange. So what that is like, I contacted, I think it was like 35 letterpress printers from around the nation at that time. So I talked to Amos, and I talked to Brad, and all these other people that I had learned or met along the way, and everyone's like, yeah, we're in. So everybody had to print an edition of whatever it was, 40 prints, and they're all the same size, 8 by 10, and they're all on this theme, and the theme was the end of times, because that year, so it was 2011, my birthday that following year was supposed to be like the end of the world, like the end of the Mayan calendar, 12/21/12. So in theory, we were all going to go up in a ball of flames. So I was like, let's have a quick party before that happens. So the theme was end of the world, and send me these prints. We'll put them all together, collate them, make little packages, and send them back to you. And it was a blast. And we got some really cool work, and we made posters for it. And we had a show in town, and everybody came, and we printed and partied, and it was amazing. And it kind of was cool because everyone was like, you should do this again. You were really good at herding artists, So, all right. The next thing that happened was one of the printers in this exchange was this woman, Jirta, from Sweden. And we had started to become friends online. And, I was sort of doing these little, she really liked that broadside exchange. She's like, well, why don't you get some money and come out here and print with me? And I was like, hell yeah, I love to travel. That's my thing. So I got a grant, and I went out to Sweden and printed with Jirta in her house with her big, this was a Golding or something like that. But we got to print, and I carved stuff, and we had a bunch of people that came to take this workshop, and it was amazing. We had a blast. During that trip, I went and printed with a guy named Robert in France. It was really cool. Neither of us really spoke each other's language, so we do a lot of shouting and pointing. But one of the things he really thought was hilarious about me, obviously I cuss a lot, but one of the things he thought was really funny was how I could smush swears inside of words. He would just drop to the floor laughing when I'd say, that's unfucking believable. And he'd be like, wow, So anyways, we did this whole book about slang and swearing. And so I carved these silly little images, and he printed, and it was just fun. It was cool to do that. So then I'm like coming back. I think the point of that was like, it was really inspiring for me to hang out with other printers, see their shops, see what they do, see how they do stuff, how they, whatever. So that was really cool. Came back. Draplin is one of my design heroes, and it was really cool. He came to town, the town that is right outside of St. Joe called St. Cloud, and it was really huge for me that the design firm that was bringing him to town contacted me and was like, would you design the save the date for it? And that was huge to be like kind of validated that like these local design places were like, we need Bruno to do the save the date because she talks just like him, and it's sort of on brand. So I did, and I got to meet him, and he's a stud, and that was really fun. So then back to the cards now. The cards were really starting to pick up some momentum, and I was getting like reps. I didn't even know what a rep was, but it was like someone calls me and says, I want to peddle your cards up and down the East Coast, and I'll take whatever it was, 15%, and you just ship out these orders. And I'm like, that sounds rad. And back then they were like faxing me orders, and I didn't have a fax machine, so I'd have them fax it to like this preschool down the street, and I'd be like, I gotta run and grab my faxes. But it was huge. It was like really, I was making hella money on these cards for a while. And I started going to this trade show in New York, which was a blast. I love New York and partying in New York, and so all of this was cool, but I was just bleeding money. I mean, you have to set up a whole booth and do all these things, and it was cool, it was really fun. But I learned, one of the things I learned right away was like, again, I wasn't hugely eyeballs deep in social media like I am now. Like I have a problem, I'm probably a little addicted, but back then I wasn't kind of watching what everyone was doing yet, and I just was head down, printing in my shop, making shit that I thought was funny. And when I came to this trade show where there's another, 300, 400 other card makers, like my stuff just stuck out like a sore thumb, which at first I was like, oh, that's bad. And then I was like, oh no, that's really good. Like all these buyers were like, where the hell did you come from? I've never seen anything like this. It doesn't look like anyone else. Like I didn't know it was hashtag trending. I didn't give a shit. And everyone else was like, oh, pineapples are trending and neon pink. And I was like, well, I'll never do that. The point is, I just kind of, in doing my own thing, I'd built, a whole huge inventory that was just totally different than everyone else. So again, the cards were great. And in that, we also collaborated. I had a bunch of other goofball letterpress printer friends that we all were like the same twisted weirdos. And so we would like get our booths by each other, and we'd have parties, and we'd have these big dice that the buyers had to roll. It was cool. We called ourselves the Dirty Rollers, and it was hilarious. So again, collaborating, finding other people, teaming up is just a lot easier to move forward. So also, just talking about how I'm all over the place, I think I have a little of the ADHD as well. I am really into teaching. I like teaching about letterpress, but I don't want to be a teacher. I want to do my own stuff. I want to be in my own print shop. So doing these like short residencies were really cool with young kids. It also gave me the chance to do a lot of work that like I wouldn't, because I'd get paid to sit around and teach, so I could do cool stuff like this giant crow print. So that was cool. I got to teach at St. Ben's, which was kind of full circle. I got to someone was on sabbatical, and they asked me, even though I don't have an MFA, I got to teach for a semester, and I was in my dad's old office, which was like totally like amazing. This gal that was an intern from France was a gal that I had met when I printed with Robert, just full circle randomness. So then I went back to the End of Times 2, the broadside exchange. We did a second run of it, and were you part of all of them, Brad? Yeah. So it was just getting the gang all back together. This was maybe 2016, 2017, when all the world felt like it was going to hell in a handbasket again. And so we rallied everybody, and there we are having a show again. There's Brad in front, some other rock stars. And it was amazing. I really enjoyed planning that and hosting stuff like that. Like I think that was me figuring out another thing that I enjoy and am good at. So that was huge, good turnout. That exhibition went back to MCBA, which was kind of cool for me to go back, to show off some of the stuff that we did. And then at that time, Amos was back having a big show upstairs, so we got to hang out and print together again, which was huge. Went back to France. This was random. I have way too many slides in this thing, but my point is that I'm kind of like into all the things. So now we're back to, has anyone seen that pressing on video? If you're at all into letterpress, this guy has. It's really cool, and our friend Aaron directed it and produced it, blah, blah, blah. And it was really cool for us to like have one of our own doing cool stuff like that. So I made some posters and hosted a big poster event, and we had a screening at the movie theater. And it was cool too to like, I'm sometimes the cheese that stands alone in this little town where like I'm a townie, but I'm also involved with all the colleges. So I'm like trying to always bridge and bring everyone together, which for what reason that they don't already come together escapes me. But again, I'm good at it. I can bring all these people together for, with a common goal, and it's really cool. So, another random job that I had was I taught preschool, which I'm sure is I mean, you've only heard me talk for 10 minutes and I'm swearing like a sailor, but it turns off when kids are around, which is kind of cool. So I was teaching preschool for a couple years before, I went full on with the business, and I got a thing with kids. Kids dig me, and so I was trying to bring kids into what I do too. And so what I did is I called this a kid collab, where I'd give them a little linoleum block and a Sharpie, and they would draw a picture, and then I would do a 5-color reduction print of it. And so my whole theory was like, parents have all this, crappy art that their kids do, and it's all jumbled up and it's like tacked on the fridge. And I was like, well, how about if I do something really beautiful? It could be on a frame and on your wall. And it was huge, and parents loved it. And it was really fun to be able to get kids in the shop and show them what I do and yada yada. So that was cool. The same thing of like what we're doing over at the art center is like, people don't know about letterpress, and the best way to teach about it is to have you come and see it and smell it and do it, and then you're like, wow, this is amazing, I want to know more. So that's why it's cool to come and do things like this. But what I've learned is like getting people in my shop is like just key. So I started doing these events where this was like a design firm, and especially designers who've only known computers, it's really cool to get them using type as forms and having parameters where you can't just click a button and change the color. Like, you have to slow down, and it's really fun, and I enjoy doing that, and that's kind of a bigger direction of where I'm going right now. So now I'm in this little town, and I'm this small business, and I've been organizing like a shop small crawl. I've been organizing all the businesses for years, and this is just another thing I do. And the shop small crawl is pretty cool. I branded like the town, and I'm like the director of tourism, which is, because I have so much time, but it's cool. And I do rally everyone, and it's cool to be a big fish sometimes, in a little pond, and I've come to love this little town. So now we're at end of times 3. I like 3s, so we wanted to wrap it up and do a 3rd. And this was end of times precious time. So this was like, we rallied kind of half of the old group and a bunch of new, and it was getting more and more international. We had printers from South America and the UK and Amsterdam. I mean, it was really amazing. And again, a bunch of them came to town. We had a panel talk, and we had a big show, and at that time I had a big exhibition, which was huge for me. This was like all my work, over so many years, and it was really cool because I am this like, like blue collar, townie. So I got all of these people to come to this fine art exhibition, and they're like, man, I've never even been on this campus, but since it's you, I figure I could. So I feel like I've also had that impact on people, like, if it's Bruno and it's art, maybe I can still like it. Sometimes people get really detached from art unless they sort of have an intro to it. So that's kind of cool. Then went on another traveling trip with my buddy Amos. We went down to South America and printed, which was amazing. Okay, now we're at the pandy. So the pandy hits. I like to call it the pandy, which sounds kind of cute, because it's not cute. But anyways, one of the things I did as this was hitting was my niece, back to the 15-year-old who used to hang in the shop with me. She's like, okay, there's about to be a shitload of kids home. You need to do something cool. So why don't you like read books at lunch? Just see how it goes. We have no idea how long it's going to go, and just give it a shot. So I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So I posted this goofy little picture, and the next day it was shared like 100 million times. And I thought I was going to be, doing Facebook Live, which I really didn't even know how to operate. I thought it was going to be like my 2 friends' kids, but it was like thousands of people were watching me be an idiot and read kid books and like make sound effects. And it was huge. And it was like, it was amazing, and I loved it, but it was cool because I would get messages from parents that were like, oh my God, my kids are obsessed with you. And it's like the 30 minutes a day that I can like go take a shower and get away from my kids. And they love you and they talk like you, which they weren't super stoked about. But it was It was awesome. And so, you know, I was doing that for a while, and then my niece, she's got more of a business brain than I do, and she'd be like, okay, bro, you've been babysitting kids for a while, now monetize it. Like, do something with all of these people that are watching you. And I'm like, oh yeah, good idea. So I started doing these, I called them kid card kits. Obviously I like alliteration, but I would make these cards that just had eyeballs and a little cute message. And then you could color them, and they would come with stamps, and they'd come with everything. And so, you know, obviously kids couldn't see their friends, blah, blah, blah. I shipped out so many of these. It was incredible. It was really cool because for the first time, like, my website was really going nuts, and it hadn't before. Like, it was, oh, orders would come in here and there, but over the pandy, it was madness. So the kid card kits were huge. And then the next thing I did, I actually took a cue from my buddy Brad again, and I made a poster. So this was April 5th, and our governor, who was kind of a badass, he was really amazing at kind of rallying and you know, talking in this really cool way and kind of calming everybody. So I took his words and I made these posters, and I mean, I think I probably printed 800 or 900 of these posters, and they went all over. And I mean, you couldn't drive through the metro and not see them in windows. I wish I would have had a cool slide thing like you did. But it was amazing. And then at that time, I also was picking up on timing, you know, so RBG passed away, and I kicked those posters out really close to that, and they kind of blew up too. So it was cool to sort of be pivoting and doing different stuff to like adapt to whatever was going on in the world. So this is a cool little video that I'm going to play rat quick. It's really quick, but this is a little bit of a peek into my shop and a project I got to do for MSP magazine. So like they had this magazine, the editor or whatever called me, and she was like, I liked, you know, that little poster series you started. Would you be willing to do something for the cover? And this was like January 2021. And I was like, yeah, man, that'd be amazing. So this is me making the print that would be on the cover of this magazine. So set and type, that was my Vandercook press, setting some wood type. It was really cool to be able to walk into Whole Foods and see this magazine on the shelves too. Like, that was a pretty big thrill. So it was just two colors. I did like a split fountain background and then the black text on top. Yeah, so cute. I have a good friend that's a videographer too, so that doesn't hurt. Yeah, no. Okay. So, wait, I gotta move to the next one. Oh, so that's the magazine. And yeah, that was amazing. I got to team up with these gals, this gal, Dara Beavis, and Dr. Joy Lewis. They're these two really badass African-American gals from Minneapolis that were writers and publishers. And it was kind of after the whole George Floyd thing where, you know, I was like, I don't have the words, but I have a print shop, you know, like I needed to find someone whose words, you know, I could print and elevate.